Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and hope you guys are having a good day out there, and really appreciate y'all swinging by the channel. And in light of what has been talked about the last month or so regarding bed fishing, bed fishing's been in the news because whether it be tournaments or this whole, debate over whether you should be fishing during the spawning season. Sort of want to have a discussion on that today and give you guys my thoughts on it, and really break a lot of myths, because there's a lot of myths out there from some YouTubers that think they know more about bed fishing and spawn fishing than what they really do. So I sort of want to get the record straight on that a little bit in today's episode. I'm also, guys, thank you very much out there for everybody that's taken time to hit that subscribe button here at Intuitive Angling. You guys know we're working hard to get to 150,000 subscribers, and we're getting there pretty fast, so much appreciated. And also, guys, real quick, right now Tackle Warehouse has got a big spring blowout deal going on, 35% off on a bunch of stuff on the website. So I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video if you guys would like to use that link and get you some good deals on tackle. I really appreciate that. Okay, guys, if you're following, like everybody does, follows the whole bass fishing, news on social media and everything, bed fishing's in the news. And I have been, if you guys have watched the channel, I have been a big proponent about getting rid of bass tournaments during the prime spawning time, and in general, not allowing people to keep fish during the spawn, which for my life, guys, I don't understand how anybody cannot get behind that. Why, as a community of bass anglers, why would we not want to allow the bass to spawn undisturbed for the benefit of not only the bass, but us catching the bass down the road? It only makes sense. It's like, we equate this all the time. It's like allowing open season on does when they're getting ready to have their babies. It's the same thing. And I don't understand where, if you take, if in every single lake across the country, yeah, granted they spawn over the course of a certain period, but for the most part, the majority of the bass are going to spawn within a 3 or 4 week period. And we know when that is geographically based upon some factors. Why not just say during this period of such and such and such and such, you can't have tournaments. There's no bass tournaments allowed here, and you cannot keep bass. And the problem you have with this is a lot of people have this myth. They say that if you fish in the spring, you're fishing for bedding fish if you fish in the spring. That's a bunch of BS, guys. That is not true, because let's talk about certain parts of the country. Let me use my part of the country here in Missouri, because everything's a little bit different. Now, in Missouri here, there's a lot of different things that factor into when the primary spawn occurs, the majority of the spawn. And that has to do with weather patterns. It has to do with, how much water's coming into the lake, whether it's dropping or rising, the water visibility in the lake. There's a lot of factors that contribute to a successful spawn or the bass not spawning. But for the most part, like here in Missouri, under normal conditions, if the lake's not flooded out, or if we don't have some big Arctic front roll in, you can expect most of the bass, probably 80% of the bass, are going to spawn between, say, like the first and last week of April. There's like a 3-week period where the majority of the spawning takes place. Now, yeah, there may be some early spawners, and there may be a few late spawners, but the vast majority of these bass are going to spawn during that 3-week period. So when somebody makes a comment that just because you're fishing in the spring, anytime you fish in the spring, even if you can't see a visible bedding fish, you're catching bedding fish, that is not true, because you have 3 different phases of bass any time during the springtime of the year. If you go to the lake during the prime bedding time, like at Table Rock Lake, the 2nd or 3rd week of April, there are going to be some fish on the bed. There's going to be a lot of fish on the bed, but there's also going to be bass in the pre-spawn phase that are not bedding, and there's going to be some bass that spawned earlier that may be in the post-spawn phase. There may be some fry garters at the same time that there's actually spawners, and then there may be some bass out on some secondary staging areas that have not spawned at the same time there's fry garters and fish spawning. So the point is it's not all encompassing, and every part of the country has a different type of spawning phase. If you're down south, like in Florida, that spawning phase can go a little bit longer. If you're up north, it's a little bit shorter. If you're in the middle, it's a little bit shorter. So when you're talking about visibly fishing for fish and fishing at the same time, you're still fishing for spawning fish. That is not true. That is a myth that does not exist. You're going to be fishing for the fish that you're going to be fishing for during those prime periods. A lot of them are bedding, but what we're talking about in today's topic, as far as this whole bed fishing thing, is visible sight fishing and using forward facing sonar to find beds that you cannot find that are visible. Now, visible sight fishing has been around ever since I've been fishing tournaments, and it's been a big debate. There's been a lot of people that think it's okay, and there's a lot of people that don't think it's okay. But from a conservation standpoint, if you look at it, if you take everything out of the equation and look at bed fishing purely from a conservation standpoint, it makes there's every reason in the world not to put pressure on those fish during those prime bedding times. It doesn't make any sense to do that, and for the life of me, I don't understand why tournament organizations have not tried to work around that a little bit. It's easy to do. All you have to do, it's like if you're on the Gulf Coast states down there, if you're in Alabama and Florida and Texas, don't have tournaments in March. If you're in my part of the country, in the Ozarks, and through the eastern part of the country, like Lake Norman and all that type of stuff, don't have tournaments in April. If you're fishing up north where the smallmouth are, don't have tournaments on top of spawn there. It's not going to kill you not to fish for 1 month out of the year. You can put your tournaments, earlier in the year. Start putting some tournaments in December, January, and take April out of the equation. I don't understand why people are fighting against that. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And the thing about this whole spawn thing is when you're talking about the ethics of bed fishing and the fact that, just because you're fishing in the spring, you're fishing for bedding fish. There's a difference between fishing, just going out fishing and not knowing where the beds are, not being able to see the beds, and just fishing and catching some fish. Yeah, you might catch it, you might accidentally throw on top of a bed, but more than likely when you're bass fishing and you can't see the beds and you think the fish are sort of in that nesting phase, what's the odds of you throwing your lure right on top of a bed in water visibility that much and catching that fish the first cast that you're in there? Most of the time, you're catching fish that are not actually nesting and spawning at that same time. Now, the ethics part of it comes within the visual sight fishing and the forward-facing sonar unit. And that's what we're trying to take out of it, because we're trying to create an element of fair chase here. And when you're looking at a visible nesting fish, guys, it is fascinating to watch. I love watching fish bed, and it's fun to catch them off a bed. I'm not saying it isn't. I've caught fish off of beds, and there's something that's really fun about pitching onto a bed that you see a fish and seeing the fish react to your luring and hooking that fish, and then seeing that fish's head turn sideways in that clear water. It's fun, but it's also fun to eat freaking cheesecake, but you don't want to do it every day because it's not good for you. And it's the same with bass. It's not good for the fish. It doesn't take an Einstein to figure out that it's not good for the bass fishing population in a lake to take fish off the bed when they're trying to lay babies. I don't understand why that's so difficult. So anyway, this whole concept, or this whole conversation about, you can't regulate bed fishing because you don't know when they're bedding, and if you're fishing for, during the spring, you're fishing for spawning fish. That is a very weak excuse, because in a perfect world, every single tournament organization, when they laid out their schedule, I don't care if it's Lake Okeechobee or if it's Clear Lake in California or if it's Bull Shoals Lake or whatever, you can look at that lake and say, look, traditionally here is the prime spawning time. This is the peak window of spawning. Let's just not have a tournament here. It's like here in Missouri, it's like there's no reason whatsoever to have a bass tournament between April 5th and April 20th. It's not that hard. You got 3 weeks just to lay off on it a little bit, let them do their thing. And yeah, there may be some bass. If you come in there March 29th, there may be some fish on the bed. If you come in there May 1st, there may be some fish on the bed, but the majority of the bass by far are going to spawn during that window. And the conservation departments understand this. They understand the correlation between water temperature and water clarity and water level and moon phases to be able to make a pretty accurate assessment of when that prime spawn period is going to have, and just say you can't do this. They do it on streams here in Missouri, that you're not allowed to fish during a certain period in streams, but they don't do it on lakes. Answer me why that is the deal. So I don't know, guys. It's a little disappointing. I don't understand where you got a huge group of bass anglers that are against bed fishing. They're against forward-facing sonar technology. They're against other things that can potentially harm the future sustainability of our sport, and to the extent of which we don't understand, but we understand that there is some impact that we have. And there's nobody that can tell me, I don't care what you say, if you allow full-blown bed fishing, whether it be visible sight fishing or using forward-facing sonar for bed fishing or whatever, it's impossible to deny the reality that that does not have some impact on the fish. The level of impact that it has remains to be seen, because some people that bed fish in the spring, like here in Missouri, we have a bunch of people out that go night fishing in the middle of April, and they're probably fishing for bedding fish, night fishing, and those fish go in the cooler. They get the fillet knife. And then, another thing about that, if you have a bass tournament and it's 8 o'clock in the morning and you catch a 5-pounder off a bed at 8 o'clock in the morning and haul that fish around in the live well all day long, not only is that fish going to survive, it may or may not survive, but there's a chance that fish will not spawn. Because bass, when a bass has a repeated set of negative variables thrown at them during the spawn, whether it be weather changes, weather variations, stresses, whatever, they'll just absorb their eggs. They won't even lay their eggs. And that's why some spawns are more successful in others. Sometimes you have a stronger year class than others, and that has to do with all these variables surrounding the spawn. So they have enough challenges, guys. A bass has enough challenges with everything in the lake wanting to eat the babies. Everything in the lake wants to eat the eggs. They don't need bass fishermen to exacerbate that problem. Just let them do their thing, and quit trying to justify and quit trying to villainize people that don't encourage bed fishing. And everybody that fishes tournaments are part of the problem, because a lot of people say, Randy, you're a big hypocrite. You bed fish forever, because you fish tournaments forever. That's because I have to. It's like I don't have any choice. I can't set the schedule. It's like, unless I just don't want to fish tournaments, I got to go where they want to. I can voice my opposition to it. And if I fish during the spawn time of the year, I always look for those outliers. I always look for the pre-spawn fish or the post-spawn fish when the fish are actually spawning. It's like, I don't go out and put that trolling motor on high and look for beds. That's not the way I fish, for a couple different reasons. I try to target those other fish that are not in that stage. But the point of the matter is, guys, is when somebody tells you, if you're fishing for spawning, if you're fishing in the springtime of the year, you're fishing for spawning fish, regardless if you can see them or not, that is a bunch of BS, because you have 3 phases. There's pre-spawners, spawners, and post-spawners at the lake, any lake in the country, at the same time. You don't know which ones you're catching. If you flip up to a tree stump there in 6 inches of water visibility the second week of April, you don't know if that fish is cruising through there, if it's staging, if it's getting ready to build a bed, if it's nesting, if it's sitting there garden fry. You don't know what the stage of that fish is. So this whole point about just because you're fishing just because you can't see them, you're still catching bedding fish in the spring. That's not the point. That's not the point of the discussion here. That's some offshoot of it. We're talking about doing what we can as an angling community to protect the future sustainability of the sport. That's what we're doing. Now, you can debate all this stuff that we're talking about how many percentage of fish you're actually catching off the bed. But the point is the people that are against this, and the same people that are against forward-facing sonar technology, have a vested interest in the future sustainability of the sport. And I don't understand why people can't get on board with that. It's not that big of a deal. They act like their rights are being infringed upon, and they're just getting their arms twisted behind their back, and nobody's going to tell them what to do. And it's sort of a selfish point of view. It's like the bigger picture here, and the for the greater good, is we need to do everything we can as an angling community to make sure that we hand off the sport better than we found it, and it's sustainable for the next generation. And going out and encouraging people to catch bedding bass with forward-facing sonar, or saying it's okay to catch any fish you see that's nesting on the bed, or anything like that that potentially diminishes the fisheries, the fish populations in the lake. It's just not a smart thing to do. And like I said, I don't understand why people can't get on board with that. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. That's been my experience. Like I said, I'm sharing the experiences I have for fishing over 50 springs and seeing bass spawn for over 50 years. That's been my experience with that. So anyway, guys, hope you all are well, and we'll talk later.